Another disappointing loss for the U.S. men's national team as they flame out of the Nations League, losing 1-0 to Panama in the first really big bad loss of the Mauricio Pochettino era. We're going to talk about what went wrong, what can they actually change about it, and which parts aren't their fault next here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. So that was ugly. There's really no two ways around it, and we can break this down every which way, but it's a bad loss. It's a bad loss to a Panama team that has given the United States fits, but was missing some key players and frankly just isn't as talented. And this is a trend with the United States men's national team where they lose to clubs, to countries where they are more talented. And the commonality has been that they do not equal the sum of their parts. They did not under Berhalter. He took a lot of the blame for it, and now we're seeing more of the same under Mauricio Pochettino. Now, one of the differences is what Pochettino said after the fact. After the game, he said, you cannot win just by wearing the shirt. Right? He said, the badge, the crest, being the United States does not mean you're going to win. And boy, if that's never more true than it has been today, just in a lot of different ways. But that's the point. Berhalter tended to make excuses and cover for the guys, and Pochettino straight up said that's not good enough. Now, he's putting this on the players, which I'm happy about because some of this does fall on the players, but some of it is being put on Pochettino. And I'm not sure how much of that is fair, and some of it needs to be put on U.S. soccer because there are a few things that really set the United States players up to fail in this regard. So we're going to talk about all these different things, break down a bunch of different reactions and causes here in just a second. But before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get down in the comment section. Where do you put the blame on this? How do you divvy it up between players, Pochettino, the United States Soccer Federation, or are we just not that good? Is this about what happens in the United States? Is this our talent level? Get in the comment section, let me know your thoughts. You can also leave some comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. Alright, so the first part is I want to talk about the way this game was set up, and I'm going to do a little bit of excuse making for the players with the caveat that ultimately they do need to overcome this. Now, we have seen a long history of this group of players play up or down to the magnitude of the competition. Not necessarily the competition level, but the intensity and the relevance of the game, the magnitude of the game. They showed up in the World Cup, right? The big lights came on and the switch got flipped and they played well. They played well in the World Cup until they got to face a Netherlands team that they simply were not better than. I think they played as well in the World Cup as they could under Berhalter in a system that did not suit their strengths, and I don't think was ever going to help them be more than the sum of their parts, right? So I thought their World Cup performance was pretty good, and they have a history of rising to the occasion when it dictates it, when it matters most. But that's really tough to survive on. At some point, they're going to go to flip that switch, and it's not going to happen. And we have seen countless occasions where they're playing in an empty stadium, more on that to come, or playing in a tough environment or whatever, and they just sort of lack that intensity. And part of that stems from the players themselves. The leaders on this team are not particularly, rah-rah, fire up the troops kind of players. Christian Pulisic has the personality of a boiled potato. Doesn't make him a bad guy. I love Pulisic, but he's not a vocal leader that's going to get his teammates fired up. That's just not who he is. Weston McKennie's a guy they love, but he's not that kind of super intense guy either. Tyler Adams is a great, should be that guy, and he's the first one to step in and fight the other team on the field, but he's sort of a soft-spoken guy in the locker room, so they don't have those type of players, and frankly, you can't change that. Now, that is part of what Mauricio Pochettino was brought in to be. He is that guy. He was that guy as a player. He's been that guy at every stop. He is that kind of manager. Not having been in, behind the scenes with him to see how it went before the game, he obviously did not get them fired up. Maybe he realizes, hey, I got to light a fire under these guys' asses if I want them to wake up and play. We'll see what happens when they come into a third place game that now means even less than the Nations League already did, which didn't mean anything in the first place, but at least it's supposed to be a competitive game. We'll see how they come out. The intensity is what we want to see. I made a video on that a while ago in Pochettino's first game. I didn't worry about tactics. I didn't worry about anything else. I wanted to see the intensity, and it was there. In his first game as the U.S. coach, they were intense, and that was a good sign to see. It seems to have dwindled. Maybe now, having been through a couple camps with him, it's wearing off already. That's pretty quick for that to be wearing off, but I don't know. It was a very low intensity game, which is exactly the sort of thing the other CONCACAF clubs can prey on, because they come in with this intensity and they are the underdog and they play for their lives, and the United States just doesn't, and that's not new. That was a problem under Berhalter, and it seems to be continuing, and that you do have to put on the players 100%. I will not excuse that. At some point, you got to get fired up and ready to play. That said, boy, U.S. Soccer is not making it easy on them. A 4 o'clock in the afternoon game at a 70,000 person stadium that you had zero chance of filling because you had it in the late afternoon in the most traffic gridlocked, congested city in America. You've got it in a non-soccer stadium, right? You put them in these big American football stadiums. You put it on a pitch that's not as wide as it could be. This was not even a full-size field. It's within the stipulation, so it was legal, but the World Cup pitches will be wider, and that helps the U.S. A bigger pitch would help the U.S. because you're playing an inferior team that you know is going to pack the box, and you have strength at your wide positions. That is an area of strength that you can't utilize when you're on a narrower pitch. So everything here is stacked against the United States when they are the host. It's an absolute joke. This is where U.S. Soccer is doing them a disservice. Now, do they have to do some of this on their own? The players, yes, absolutely. But could we put them in a position to succeed? Where is our Wembley? Where is our San Siro? We need a national stadium that is built for soccer and isn't this giant empty dome that's supposed to hold 70,000 when it's on a Thursday night on the West Coast and nobody can get there. It's something a little more quaint, something a little more soccer friendly, something that gives us some sort of advantage both in the atmosphere and actually on the playing pitch. Right? We couldn't get a full-size field somewhere. It's just an absolute joke. U.S. Soccer continually makes it about money, makes it about themselves at the expense of their players. And so, yes, 100% the players need to figure out how to get themselves up for these games. But Jesus, U.S. Soccer, can you do your guys a favor and help them out a little bit? Because you are not doing them any favors whatsoever here to help with that intensity. That was the most lackluster crowd stadium atmosphere I've seen for a game that somewhat mattered in a long time. And, when you have been an athlete, these guys are not robots. There's not an actual switch you can flip. You do sometimes have to feed on that. And it just simply did not exist. It was not there. And that does make it tough. So I will give a little bit of an excuse there. I would give a lot of an excuse for that if it wasn't a trend that we had seen for years with this group of players. This group of players is part of the problem, and I think I've talked before about our expectations with the golden generation, and maybe that's on us for expecting this generation to be a group of players that can truly compete on the world stage. Now, this group is good enough to beat Panama. They haven't shown it, but they are better than that Panamanian team, player for player. If you line them up, now they are not obviously a better team as a unit, clearly, as they continually lose or draw to them, but player for player, they do have more talent. But not on the world stage, and our expectations need to be adjusted. And I've said that for years now. This golden generation we should not be talking about, yes, we can compete for a World Cup. No, we can't. And that's not the players' fault. That's not an intensity thing. That's not Berhalter's fault. That's not Pochettino's fault. That's not Christian Pulisic's fault. They simply don't have the talent pool to genuinely compete as one of the top 5 clubs in the world for a World Cup. They still shouldn't be losing Nations League games to Panama, though. But they are lacking in depth, which I realize is contradictory because I just made a video yesterday talking about how far their depth has come, and it has, right? 5 or 6 years ago, we had a good starting 11, and then as soon as you turned to the bench, it was like, ooh, career MLS lifers who really it was a massive step down in talent. We do have depth. There are another 3 or 4 guys, if everyone's healthy and in form, we've got, I think, 14 guys that could be considered starting caliber players and really good players. And if everyone's healthy in there, we are, I would say, a top 12 team in the world, maybe 15, somewhere in that range, that 10 to 15 range on any given day. Of course, some of those guys weren't healthy. I talked about that yesterday. We had some injuries, and I think the absence of Jedi Robinson was very notable. The lack of Serginho Dest was very notable. The lack of Giovanni Renya was very notable. We're going to talk about him in a second because I think everyone's getting that one wrong. But we don't have depth in really key positions. We got lots of guys who are wing attacking midfield hybrid guys, right? We got a whole bunch of defensive midfielders, more than we can play. Adams, Cardoso, who was hurt, McKennie, that's probably his best spot. I think Tessman was a little miscast as a number 10, or he actually slid back, and then McKennie played some 10. They rotated a lot. Neither one was a true 10. But we are missing depth in key spots, like attacking midfield, like striker, like goalkeeper. Okay, some really, really key spots. Fullback, left and right back. When Jedi Robinson and Serginho Dest aren't out there, it's a step down. I like Joe Scally, but he's more of a defensive-minded center back, right back hybrid. So those attacking fullbacks, we don't have the depth there when those guys miss out on those four positions: fullback, goalkeeper, striker, and attacking midfielder, number 10. We do not have the depth. And when somebody is missing, or somebody is out of form, or somebody is benched for whatever reason, it's a massive step down, and guys have to play out of position. Weston McKennie, who I love and I think should be in every starting lineup somewhere, probably in a different position because he's so versatile. He can handle the 10, but he's miscast in it. He's not a dynamic playmaking number 10. He's not going to have the progressive passes and really service the strikers the way they need to be. Yunus Musa is a great ball carrier from deep, but he's not really that number 10. The best 10 outside of Giovanni Renya is probably Christian Pulisic, but you'd like to have him on the wing at certain times. So, but he is playing as a 10 in Milan, and so he's really probably going to have to be the option at this point, simply because we have other wing depth and because Giovanni Reyna is not getting the job done. Now, we got to talk about him for a little bit. Everyone is harping on Pochettino and saying this is Pochettino's big mistake, right? How much of this is to blame the players? How much of this is to blame Pochettino? And they turn to Giovanni Reyna as the obvious thing that Pochettino did wrong. And I just don't know how we're still making this mistake. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes with Giovanni Reyna at training and with his coaches. But the list of coaches who have now elected not to play him is getting really, really long. And some really good, credible names on there. And we are getting to a point where we are defending Renya's "it's everybody else, it's not me" sort of outlook here. And that was what happened at the World Cup when mommy and daddy had to come rescue him. I don't know what's going on at Borussia Dortmund, but they do not want to play him. And they're on their third coach in a row who has not wanted to play him. Greg Berhalter basically only played him out of necessity, but clearly did it reluctantly. And now Mauricio Pochettino seems to have no urgency to put him in the lineup, despite an absolutely obvious need for his skill set. If it was ever apparent that we don't have a strong playmaking number 10, it was last night when we had a packed box and tight little spaces and no creativity to exploit it. That is what Giovanni Reyna does, and does better than any other American outside of maybe Christian Pulisic. And we didn't have that, and we missed that. So if there was ever a time to put him on, that was the time. But and that's what everybody's shouting and saying, well, how could Mauricio Pochettino miss that? He didn't miss it. There's no chance he just didn't think of it, or that he doesn't know that. No, there has to be another reason. Now, he has stressed the importance of having guys and prioritizing guys who are in form and are playing at their clubs, with the one exception being Matt Turner, which, by the way, cost the United States, right? Matt Turner was out of position and gave up the goal, and you have to wonder if he's playing more and in better form, if the shakes off a little bit of the rust and he doesn't make that mistake. But I guess he looks at, I'm guessing here, I'm speculating, that Pochettino looks at the goal situation and says either, well, even Rusty, he's our best choice, or, well, it's his job to lose, right? He was the number one goalkeeper at the World Cup. Until he shows me he can't do it, he's going to continue to be the number one goalkeeper. I think he just did, by the way, and I'll bet we see Zach Steffen or Schulte in the second game. But Giovanni Reyna has by no means locked down his spot. It is not his starting role to lose by any stretch, and he's not playing in Europe. So for me, that's the difference between him and Matt Turner, but I also wouldn't have been shocked if Matt Turner hadn't played for simply that reason. And whatever it is, Renya is not showing Pochettino in training that he has enough form to overcome the lack of playing. So how we can continually defend Giovanni Reyna at this point is beyond me, because it's at least the last three coaches at Dortmund and the last two coaches for the United States that have no real desire to play him. No one is going out of their way to put him in the lineup. And even when he's been used sparingly. That can't be everybody else's fault. At some point, that has to be on the player. He's either not showing it in training, or they just don't think he can handle it, or maybe he's just a dick and nobody likes him. I don't know what's happening, but it can't. The common denominator is Gio Renya. That is the one commonality across all these coaches who just don't want to play him. So to say that is the obvious thing that Pochettino did wrong, it to me is continually making scapegoat out of other people at the expense of Giovanni Renya, and it needs to stop, because at some point he's got to be accountable for his lack of playing time. And to me, it was his lack of being in there that really cost them, right? Because it was a lack of creativity. A lack of creativity is what cost the United States in this game. Panama sat deep, packed the box. You knew they were going to. It's not like we never play this country. We play them all the time. They know they're not as talented. They know they're going to sit deep, pack the box, and make it a long night for us, and hope that we can't exploit it. And when we don't have somebody creative in the middle, we can't. So if Giovanni Reyna is not going to be that guy, it has to be Christian Pulisic, who was admittedly pretty absent last night. He's a guy who has to show up, and when he doesn't, the team really struggles. And that's more a testament to the United States' lack of depth than anything else. Even the best players don't necessarily have their best game every night. That's not how sports work. That's not how human beings work. So, Christian Pulisic has enough equity in the bank that when he has a bad night, you just go, well, Christian didn't have it tonight. Okay. However, I think it's a lot easier to disappear in games when you are out wide than when you are playing more centrally. And so when that happens, you get Christian in the center, you get the ball at his feet, and you let your best player make good things happen. Additionally, that's the part you're missing, is the creativity in the middle. It's not what Yunus Musa does best. His best trait is his ability to beat a defender one-on-one with the dribble. I actually thought he did okay at right back or wing back, whatever you want to call it. When Weah was on that side with him, they were playing off each other. It was a good way to break the press a little bit. I think he does nicely in the middle as either the second of a holding midfield pair or as the 8 who can dribble through traffic and really beat his man, but he also excels out wide, so he's versatile. He can play wing. If you had some sort of 4-4-2, he could play at that right midfielder spot. He's a good player, but he's miscast in the 10. He's better in the open spaces than the tight spaces. Weston McKennie, same thing. Great guy, love him dueling in midfield and going after those loose balls, but he's not your creative playmaker as a 10. Tim Weah, same thing, best out in space. And when you have Weah and Jedi Robinson, or Pulisic and Jedi Robinson on one side, and you could have Dest or Musa on the other, with whichever other winger is not on the left, and the two of them playing off each other, that firing crosses in is a way to overcome the lack of creativity in the middle. But again, get yourself a nice wide pitch so you can spread the defense out. Those types of players don't work as well when you have to crowd everybody in on this small pitch and when the other team packs the box. Crosses from wingers don't work as well in a crowded box, right? So that's where having too much possession actually hurts you, and letting them sit back negates the thing your club or your team does best. So, the lack of creativity at the number 10 position is what is holding the United States back at this point, and that's not something I think anybody can fix. What do we do about that? We can't conjure up an attacking midfielder. Pochettino can't make Weston McKennie a better number 10 when he's really a 6 or an 8. These guys are playing out of position, and that's where it's got to be Pulisic at the 10, running this offense through him into Flo Balogun, into Josh Sargent, into whoever it's going to be. And I do still think that when healthy, Fowler and Balogun is a full step above anybody else that they have at the striker position. I know he hasn't been in great form this year, and now he's hurt. But when healthy and in form, he is head and shoulders better than anybody else that they have. But nevertheless, none of it's going to matter if they can't get him service. None of it matters if they can't create those balls in. And yes, against the better clubs, the wings get to play a little bit more. It's more spread out. When they play somebody like England or the Netherlands, assuming they can hang with them a little better, the wings, with the crosses into a less crowded box where there's a little more transition play, all of a sudden that becomes very dynamic. But when they get CONCACAF and they play these smaller countries that are going to sit back and try to take the intensity out of it and try to take all their pace, because the U.S. has pace. When they play these countries that want to take their pace out of it, they simply cannot create in those small areas. And I don't have a solution for that. And I think that is a large portion of why the United States is a good but not great team right now, and why they're somewhere in the 10 to 15th range in the world and not a top top 8 team. So there's some stuff that's on the players. There's some stuff that's on U.S. Soccer. There's some stuff that is on Pochettino, but not playing Giovanni Renya. I stand by that. And there's some things that I think we just have to accept that this generation is missing a few key pieces. They're missing a number 10. They're missing a dynamic goalkeeper. And that is what is going to cause them, keep them from winning the World Cup in 2026. What do you think? Is there something else they're missing? Is there something else I'm missing? Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave some comments on Twitter and Blue Sky at Pitchside Pub. While you're at it, make sure you hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.